Hello and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to continue my black horse series. So here's another drawing of a beautiful black horse done in charcoal. I zoomed in a little bit here so that you can see the detail, but I'm going to zoom out so that you can see what the whole drawing looks like. And I'm going to be taking you through the drawing process. Let's have a look. Naturally, I'm starting with a sketch and I'm going to place the horse in the middle of my paper. I opted for a similar approach as with the previous black horse drawing, and you can watch that video. I'm going to put the link in the description and in the end screen as well if you want to watch that. So I'm going to have a vignette with a little bit of background around the horse, but the focus is mostly going to be on the horse and its movement. So I'm doing the sketch with a graphite pencil, and I'm going to be doing this in two stages. First I'm going to create a nice graphite pencil sketch, and after that I'm going to go over that a little bit with a charcoal pencil. And the reason why I'm going to do that is because I'm going to be going over everything with vine charcoal to create that mid-tone. So if I just went over the graphite pencil with the vine charcoal, I will probably lose most of these lines, but because I'm using a compressed charcoal pencil now, these lines will stick and my sketch won't be wasted. So I'm using a thin soft vine charcoal here to go over everything, and even though it looks like I'm ruining it now, I won't ruin my sketch. It will still be visible once I start blending this with a paper towel. Now naturally it won't look great at first, but I will be fleshing out the details both in the background and in my main subject as I go along. So I blended the background a little bit, and I'm adding a little bit more vine charcoal where needed. And I have yet to start working on the main subject. But another trick, if you're not really happy with how smooth or your background is or isn't, you can go over it a little bit with white charcoal, and then it will become a little bit smoother. So now I'm starting to work on the horse, and I'm using a sharp medium charcoal pencil. These are woodless charcoal pencils that I'm using, but this one is short and it's in a pencil holder if you're wondering what I'm holding. But it's a medium charcoal pencil, and in addition to that I'm also going to be using a soft charcoal pencil. These are both woodless charcoal pencils, and I'm going to be using the soft one for the darkest areas of the horse, like for example that hind leg under the belly here, which I blended. That's probably going to be one of the darkest areas, and also some parts of the body. So the medium and the soft charcoal pencil that I'm using are very similar in appearance and behavior, but the soft one is just a little bit darker, and that's why when I use it for some of the finishing touches, also when I go over some of the areas which I already covered with a medium charcoal pencil, I just add a touch of that soft charcoal pencil to add some of these darkest areas. But I'm going to be using that soft charcoal pencil in the earlier stages, like here as well, for example, and then I blend that and it becomes a little bit lighter, but later if I feel like I need to add a little more value, I can always add a little bit more of that soft charcoal. So for blending, as you can see, I'm mostly using either a Tortillon or brushes. I'm using a couple of different kinds of brushes. I'm either using a stiff bristle brush, which has been kind of trimmed a little bit for more thorough blending, or I'm using longer, softer brushes for those smoother areas where I don't want to push the charcoal too deep into the grain of the paper. So as you can see, I started working on the body and trying to work out that musculature of the horse. And here I'm going to do also a little bit of the background. So because I want to blend this very smoothly and thoroughly, I'm going over it with a brush, and then if I feel that I need to refine some of these highlights, I just erase them with a pencil eraser. My approach to drawing highlights when I have a glossy area like this is to shade the darkest areas first and then use my blending tools to push the charcoal towards the lighter areas. And if I later want to clean up some of these lighter areas and refine some of the highlights, like I said, I can always use my erasers, either a kneaded eraser or a pencil eraser, to pull those highlights and clean them up a little bit where I want a little bit more contrast. So the tail and the mane are kind of all over the place because the horse is galloping. So for that I used a combination of charcoal and graphite pencil here and there as well for some of these finer, thinner hairs. But it's mostly charcoal. I've done most of the hind legs, even though I'm probably going to be adding a little bit more detail to them a little bit later. But as you can see, I tried my best to clean up the edges there because it's very important to have a clean edge. Again, so that they stand out against the background. And like I said, I added a few details here and there with a pencil eraser. And on the front legs, I'm going to have a little bit of contrast with the background here because I'm going to add some grass in the background, and the upper part of that hoof, or the upper edge of that hoof, is going to be a little bit lighter, so I want some contrast with that grass in the background, and I'm going to make that a little bit darker, and I'm going to make the hoof a little bit lighter. Value contrast is very important if you want your subject to look like it's popping out of the paper, if you want to give it more of a 3D look and a feeling of volume and depth. So I'm also adding a little bit of shadow under the horse, but I don't want it too defined, so I'm blending it a little bit, softening it a little bit with my brushes. I do want some of these blades of grass to be a little bit darker and to be sticking out. So the ears are here, and I need to finish the mane. This area around the top of the neck is also very glossy, and the mane is flying all over the place. The neck is very muscular with a lot of these folds. So I'm going to have to try to imitate that shape a little bit and that texture. That's why I made sideways strokes on the neck to imitate that musculature of the neck. And as you can see, as I blend, some of these areas become a little bit lighter, even when I use a softer charcoal pencil. But once I define all of the shapes as I like, I can always go back in and add a touch of the darkest soft charcoal pencil in some of these areas which are supposed to be the darkest, because they are receiving the least amount of light, or they're furthest away from the light source, or they're completely in the shadow. So I added a little bit of ground here, maybe a little bit of dust to further suggest that the horse is galloping. And I'm just doing more blending and adding more value where needed. There's also a few edges here and there that I need to clean up a little bit, but I can't really do that until I finish with the background, because once I start working on the background, as you can see, I'm going to have to do a lot of work with the brushes and blending tools, and some of these edges are going to get smudged a little bit. That's why once I'm completely done with the background and all this work with larger brushes, I will go back to these edges and clean them all up, which is exactly what I'm doing now. And I'm also adding some of the highlights on the head and around the neck. And on the neck, on the legs and around the knees, basically I want those joints which are kind of sticking out and receiving more light to be the lightest. That's why I clean them up a little bit with a pencil eraser. I am also going to try to make the background a little more interesting by adding a few clouds of various shapes here in the background. Like I said, this is a vignette, so I don't want a fully defined background that goes all the way to the edges of the paper. I'm just gonna put some suggestions of some clouds and some grass in the background, and that should be enough, because the focus is the horse. Just cleaning up a few more of these edges and adding some more of these darker areas. And adding a little bit more shadow under the mane and around the mane. With these highlights, it's often a back and forth process, because at one point I just kind of leave the reference photo and start working by the feeling, and kind of trusting my gut as to how I'm supposed to shade certain areas and what looks better to me. So I decided to subdue some of these highlights and emphasize some of the other ones. And here is the finished drawing. I removed the tape and sprayed it with a fixative. All I have left is to sign it, and I'm going to put my signature here in the lower right corner. So the drawing is pretty much done. Like I said, it's going to be a series, so I'm going to do a few more of these black horse drawings, and also drawings of other kinds of horses. Thank you for watching. I have lots of other content. Don't forget to check out my other videos. Also, you have a link to my Patreon if you want to see full-length videos, so you may want to check that out as well. Once again, thanks for watching and bye.